What's up, guys? Brian Grossman here with Grossman Woodworking and DIY. And on today's build, we're going to be building this soft close slide out spice rack. I'm building this for my wife, for our kitchen, because for the last 5 years, this has been just a gaping hole in our cabinets. So this is going to make my wife really happy. And hey, don't judge me. I know every one of you have some kind of unfinished project there around your house. I just happen to have several. So, hey, it'll make great YouTube content. But anyway, when we first bought this house, it did not have a dishwasher. So I came in, I cut out some cabinets here next to our sink, installed the dishwasher, but it left about an 8-inch hole in the cabinets over here that did not have a door or anything. We had stuffed some pans and stuff in there, but it was a little unsightly. So I finally broke down and decided I was going to fix this. My wife and my daughter and mother-in-law were going shopping this past Saturday. So I thought, hey, this is a perfect time to jump in there and try to surprise her with a fixed cabinet. Now, I'm going to go ahead and let the cat out of the bag here. There is a design flaw with this thing. And no, I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet. I'm going to let you watch the video, see if you can figure it out. And then after the build, I'll tell you where I messed up, why I messed up, and how I plan to fix it. But with that, let's go ahead and jump into the build.
All right, so I had to wait till my wife was out of the house because I was trying to surprise her with this build. But as soon as she left, I broke out my handy oscillating saw here and cut the old face frame. Then using a hammer and a pry bar, I beat the face frame away from the cabinet carcass. I then removed the pocket hole screws from the last remaining face frame brace and started measuring for some new supports. Since the cabinet didn't have a right side up against that dishwasher, I needed to put some bracing in to support the slides for my spice rack cabinet. So I headed to the shop, grabbed some old 1x12 pine lumber that I had on hand, and started ripping some 4-inch strips that I was going to use to build those supports. Once I had my supports together, it was time to take these things inside and install them in the cabinet. Now again, one of these will be in the front of the cabinet to support the face frame, and the other will go in the back of the cabinet just to give the cabinet box some support and also to hold a top board, which is where we'll ultimately screw in the track for the door slide. Now, as I went to screw in the top board, I quickly realized that I could not get my drill in there to get those pocket hole screws in. So I switched to a shorter bit, only to realize I still couldn't get that pocket hole screw in there. So it's time to move to plan B. I went ahead and slid the refrigerator out away from the wall and decided that I would shoot some screws in from the side of the cabinet rather than from the inside. Since this cabinet butts up to the refrigerator, no one's ever going to see these holes. Of course, if you were really concerned about it, you could always countersink those holes a good bit, fill them up with some wood filler, and paint them over, and you'd never know they were there. I brought my little handy dandy right angle jig or clamp that I bought off of Amazon. I think it'll work. It should work right here, yeah. With a few countersunk holes drilled, I went ahead and shot some 1 1/4 inch screws into the side of the cabinet and the support. And then it was on to the back support piece. And we would install this one the exact same way, just in a little bit tighter quarters. And so again, for the top piece, I'm going to go ahead to the outside of the cabinet, mark exactly where that top board should meet the inside of the cabinet, drill 3 countersink holes, and shoot some 1 1/4 inch screws into it. With the 2 support pieces in place, it was back to the shop to cut the board that'll go across the inside top of the cabinet and hold our drawer slide for the top of our spice rack. And since we're using 20-inch drawer slides, I'm cutting this just a touch over 20 inches. So I went ahead and drilled a few holes where this will attach to the front and rear supports. And again, shot in some 1 1/2 inch screws to get that drawer slide support in place. Now that the cabinet carcass is together and ready, I head to the shop and grab the poplar board that I just picked up at Home Depot and start cutting out the face frame and the door that we'll be using for the build. Now, I was pretty excited about this. This is my first foray into using hardwoods. Everything I've built before has been pine and cedar. I went with poplar because it was relatively inexpensive, and I'll be painting it, so really it doesn't, the grain and beauty of the wood didn't really matter in this case. But I'm going ahead here and ripping my stiles or my vertical supports for the face frame. Then I'll also cut my rails or horizontal supports as well. So now that I have my two stiles and my two rails for my face frame, I'll start putting pocket holes in the stiles so we can get this thing assembled. In each stile, I'll get 2 pocket holes on each end to tie into the rails. And of course, while you're doing this, you want to make sure that your frame remains square and that the edges all line up where your stiles meet your rails. And since this poplar is 3/4 inches thick, I'm using 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws. And with that, our face frame is cut and ready for mounting. With our face frame together, we needed a door for this thing, so I took some quick measurements of the frame itself, cut my poplar board at the correct length for the height I needed. Then it was over to the table saw to rip it to the correct width. I then set my table saw blade at 3/8 of an inch high and started ripping basically dados on each edge of the longer sides of the door. Then it was over to the miter saw where I set the depth stop on it at 3/8 of an inch and did the same thing, cutting dados into the top and bottom of the door so that this door will inset the frame itself. Then I give it a quick test fit and it looks like we're good to go. Next up was building out the spice rack itself, and I picked up a couple of just cheap pine 1x4s for this part of it. The 3.5 inch width would fit well in the space that I had. So I went ahead and cut my front and back boards, as well as my top and my bottom, along with 2 additional shelves that I would install in the middle of the rack. Well, I forgot to hit record before I started assembling the spice racks. So I'd already drilled my pocket holes in the front and the back of the rack and attached the back of the rack to the top and the bottom. And now I'm attaching the front of the spice rack. And if I'd thought this through, I would have put those pocket holes on the other side where the door of the cabinet would cover them up. But that's okay. They'll still never be seen here behind the door. But yeah, I should have flipped those around the other way. Now here I'm just going ahead and marking the location for my shelving and drilling the pocket holes in the 2 boards for my shelves. Once I have those pocket holes drilled, I went ahead and mount the shelves in the spice rack, and I just spaced them pretty much evenly apart. I think there's about 8.5 inches between all the shelves, which is plenty of room for even the tallest spice containers. And then to serve as side rails for each shelf, I cut 8 pieces of pine lattice, which I then glued and nailed to each side of each shelf, just to keep the spices from being able to fall out the side. Unfortunately, my phone battery died right after the first one, so you'll just have to imagine the next 7 pieces being glued and nailed to the spice rack. Now let's head inside to mount those drawer slides. Forgot to hit record before I put this down, but I made these little made these little blocks here. These are 2 3/16 inches wide, which is
perfect for getting these right in the center where I wanted them. So I made 2 blocks and put one at the front, one at the back. Make sure I kept those perfectly straight, and shot a couple screws, one in the front and one in the back for now. And I left about a 1/4 inch overhang here, and I'll do the same up here to catch the lip of my frame, because the door won't go all the way back to the edge here. It just comes in about 3/8 of an inch. So it should work out about perfect to shut the door and still get maximum pull out. Now the fun part is going to be taking these blocks and trying to do the same thing up top here. But we'll get her done. We'll make it happen.
Working inside this narrow space was fun, especially on the top, but I finally got a clamp to hold that slide in place, which allowed me to get my spacer in there to get my spacing just right and shoot some screws into this thing to hold it in place. Once the rails were installed, I did a dry fit test here on my face frame and then tested the fit of my door as well. Looking good. With the slides mounted in the cabinet, I went ahead and installed the other halves of those slides on the spice rack itself, lining each one up with the front of the spice rack as well as directly in the middle. With those installed, it was time to see how this was going to work. And fortunately, it worked out perfectly. Now I just wanted to make sure the door would fit in front of the spice rack without protruding any from the face frame. Then one last thing before we head back into the house to start putting all this together: paint. Fortunately, I had some paint left over from when I originally painted those interior cabinets, and it was still in decent shape. So I got it all mixed up, painted the door and the face frame, put a couple of good coats on it, and it was ready to go. Now that our slides are all mounted and our spice rack is in place, we can go ahead and get this face frame mounted officially. I just want to make sure that that spice rack is evenly in the middle of my face frame, and then I'm going to shoot 1-inch 18 gauge brads in this face frame all the way around the edge. All that's left to do at this point is get our door mounted. So I drill my 2 countersink holes for the handle and get that handle mounted. And I really just eyeballed the height of this and of course centered it horizontally in the middle of the door itself. Then I need to mount the spice rack itself to this door. So I measure and make sure that I get it good and centered in the door. Drill 3 countersink holes and shoot my screws into place. Now for the moment of truth. Let's see if this thing goes in like it's supposed to. Not bad, not bad.
All right, guys, that wraps up our build of the soft close slide out spice rack. And if you haven't figured it out by now, where I screwed up was I mounted these top and bottom slides horizontally, which allows them to flex, and there's some give in this. And what I'd done is I'd based this build off of a spice rack up at my in-laws' house that, was done by professional cabinet makers. But the problem was I didn't look closely enough. I was looking at it again yesterday and realized that while the top slide is mounted horizontally just like I did, I looked at the bottom underneath, and that slide was mounted vertically. So it had more support, it didn't have give, and theirs doesn't have any give at all. So yeah, I'm going to need to, at some point, I'm going to put a brace on the side of this spice rack down at the bottom and mount the bottom slide vertically. I don't know that it would ever be an issue. There's not a lot of weight in those spices. It's functioning fine, but it's going to bug me. It's going to bug me, no doubt. So I will probably go ahead and fix that when I get an opportunity. Now, having said all that, my wife is absolutely tickled to death with how it is, which means I'm happy with how it is, because she's just glad not to have a gaping hole in her cabinets. She's got a place now to put all her spices out of the way. and it freed up a big cabinet next to our microwave. So it's a win-win. Mistakes were made, but it's nothing that can't be fixed, and hopefully nothing that you guys can't learn from, because I am a rookie here, just like a lot of you who are watching. I make mistakes pretty much every build, and I'm not afraid to share those with you guys because, hey, that's the only way we're going to learn, both of us. And hopefully by you seeing my mistakes, maybe you can avoid some of those in your builds. Make your own mistakes. But anyway, guys, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and little notification bell. Got a long list of builds that I want to put together for you guys. Shop renovation, woodworking business discussion, all that kind of stuff coming up in future videos. So with that, as always, guys, I will see you on the next video.